You know that sound? Those harmonies that are so perfect they literally give you chills? But behind that incredible sound was a 50-year saga of giant egos, bitter fights, and just plain chaos. So let's get into the story of rock's most brilliant and, yeah, most turbulent supergroup.
To get a sense of just how big this band was, you really only need to know one thing. At the height of their fame, the legendary promoter Bill Graham called them the American Beatles. I mean, think about that. That's not just a cool nickname, that's a statement. They weren't just another band, they were the absolute voice of a generation.
And that right there is the big puzzle of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Their music sounds like peace, love, and unity, right? But their relationships with each other were, well, the exact opposite. So how is that possible? How could four guys who sounded so perfect together spend most of their time tearing each other apart? That's what we're going to dig into.
All right, so our story kicks off back in 1968. The rock world was full of superstars, and three of them were about to crash into each other and create a little bit of magic, completely by accident.
So you've got these three huge talents, and they're all kind of at a turning point. David Crosby? Yeah, he'd just been fired from the Byrds, pretty much for being a pain to work with. Stephen Stills? His amazing band Buffalo Springfield had just imploded. And Graham Nash? He was over in England with the Hollies, making hit after hit, but he was feeling trapped creatively. The stage was perfectly set for something totally new.
The story is just legendary. The three of them end up at a party. They could never agree if it was at Joni Mitchell's place or Mama Cass's. Stills and Crosby are playing a song, and Graham Nash, who's just listening, jumps in on the third try with his incredible high harmony. And boom, that was it. That was the sound. Like Nash said, it took all of 30 seconds. He literally quit the Hollies and moved from England to LA 2 days later. Just incredible.
The trio was an immediate hit, but that beautiful acoustic sound, while perfect for an album, needed a little more muscle for the big stages. And this is where the group gets its famous fourth letter.
You know, Stephen Stills played most of the instruments himself on that first record, and he knew they needed another powerhouse guitarist for their live shows. He said, "I know a guy," and that guy was his old bandmate and sparring partner from Buffalo Springfield, the one and only Neil Young. Nash was a little hesitant because he'd never even met the guy, but one lunch sealed the deal. And just like that, the supergroup became a megagroup, CSNY.
The speed of their rise is just mind-blowing. I mean, look at this. In less than 1 year, they go from playing their second gig ever at Woodstock, of all places, to having the #1 album in America, to defining a political moment with the song Ohio, and then, poof, they break up. It's one of the fastest, most intense rise and falls in music history.
And this quote from Stills at Woodstock just says it all, doesn't it? It was a total baptism by fire. Can you even imagine? Your second time playing live is in front of 500,000 people. He wasn't exaggerating. They were terrified, but their set became one of the most iconic moments of the whole festival and shot them into the stratosphere.
And the success that came next was just off the charts. Déjà Vu sold more than 8 million copies in the US alone. To put that in perspective, it was the biggest selling album for every single member of the band ever. For that one moment in time, they were, without a doubt, the biggest band in the world.
So they're on top of the world. What could possibly go wrong? As it turns out, pretty much everything. That success led directly to their first spectacular implosion.
The tour for Déjà Vu was basically a rolling disaster. The pressure was immense, which led to a lot of drug and alcohol abuse, especially from Stills. You had massive egos clashing, like Neil Young constantly fighting with the drummer over the speed of the songs. And then, the real drama. Singer Rita Coolidge left Stephen Stills for Graham Nash. Ouch. By July of 1970, the whole thing just blew apart.
And even when they tried to reunite 4 years later for this huge stadium tour, the same old problems were there. Only now they were louder, literally. Crosby nicknamed it the Doom Tour. He said Stills and Young were having these volume wars on stage, turning their amps up so loud that nobody could even hear the harmonies, the very thing people came for. The whole thing was a commercial smash, but a total personal train wreck.
And that Doom Tour pretty much set the template for the next 40 years. The rest of the CSNY story is just this dizzying, confusing cycle of breaking up, getting back together, and constantly changing sides.
This table barely even scratches the surface. It was like a musical soap opera. One year, you'd have Crosby and Nash making amazing records as a duo. The next, you'd have the Stills Young Band. Then, CSN would get back together and have another massive hit in '77. And every 10 years or so, they'd somehow convince all four of them to get in a room again. The only thing you could ever count on was that it was never going to last.
And the breakups themselves were just as dramatic as the music. In 1976, Neil Young just disappears from his tour with Stills. He just sends a telegram. A telegram! It said, "Dear Stephen, funny how things that start spontaneously end that way. Eat a peach, Neil." Eat a peach! What does that even mean? Then, flash forward 40 years, and the final nail in the coffin comes when Graham Nash, probably Crosby's closest friend in the band, just says their friendship is over, and that's it for CSN.
And simmering underneath all this musical genius were some very deep and very real personal problems. David Crosby's long, public battle with addiction was a huge factor, and it even led to him serving jail time in the mid-'80s. That kind of turmoil casts a long shadow, making it almost impossible for a band like this to function.
But despite all the fighting, all the chaos, or maybe even because of it, their legacy is just undeniable. We're talking about four totally unique, powerful artists who changed the course of rock and roll.
If you need one single fact to understand just how insanely talented these four guys were, this is it. CSNY's is the only band in history where every single member has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame at least twice. Twice! For their work in the group and for their work outside of it. That is just unheard of. It's the ultimate proof of their individual brilliance.
You know, this photo from that chaotic '74 tour kind of says it all. There they are, together on stage, making music. But you just know that right off camera, the storm is brewing. It perfectly captures that constant push and pull, that magnetic musical chemistry fighting against their equally powerful personal friction. For years, I think fans always held out some small hope for one last reunion. But on January 18, 2023, the story really did come to its final, unavoidable end. David Crosby passed away, and with him went any possibility of ever hearing those four voices sing together again.
And so that leaves us with this one big, lingering question. Was all that tension the very thing that created the magic? Was that volatile, messy chemistry not just the price they paid for their harmony, but maybe the secret ingredient that created it in the first place? It's the enduring mystery at the very heart of their incredible music.